We're taking time to talk about the impact social media can have.
The anxiety surrounding the issue of security.
People working in agriculture have the highest suicide rates among any occupation.
A recent study of UW-Madison students shows more than half experience feelings of overwhelming anxiety.
I questioned why I got to live. And as a 14-year-old, that's really hard to do.
It's too hard to try and get any help.
Worst feeling you've ever had in your entire life, and then multiply it by 10 times. That's a pretty realistic way to describe it.
I couldn't not care about this stuff with all the stuff that my family and I has gone through.
It is really hard for the athlete who, of course, can't show any signs of weakness on the playing field or on the court, right?
People who are consistently on these platforms are 3 times more likely to suffer from anxiety and depression.
Doctors now recognize smartphone addiction as an actual diagnosable condition. Then there are factors like cyberbullying and the effects of screens on sleep.
Spread the awareness and break down the stigma. Pan, come on, I can tell you want one. With this, you just never know who you're helping or when you're helping. You just know you are.
We wanted to make sure to offer this service again. It's a free Q&A on Facebook Live. What should we be keeping in mind as we kind of prep our kids to get back into what we would consider to be normal?
I wonder if you're worried about all these upcoming changes that you don't quite know how it's going to go yet. You know, can we talk about that?
Emotions can be tough for kids to manage, especially when they don't know what they're feeling. It's a free booklet full of games and exercises kids and adults can work through together.
It's nice that people are actually talking about this stuff now.
Yeah, it is.
I think in life, everybody needs a tugboat. You need that person that you can call that you say, hey, I'm in some treacherous waters. I need you to guide me, so on and so forth.
I think it'll always be a work in progress. And that's something to look forward to, I think. Yeah.
That's somebody who cares and somebody who's on campus to help make a difference, and that's not nothing, it's better.
It's the birds chirping in the morning, it's the smell of the hay getting cut, it's, you know, drying corn, it's just the whole thing of being able to see what's going on every day in your life and knowing that you had a huge part in that.
There are brief moments for Jeff Ditzenberger and his neighbors.
I don't think there's any more noble of a profession out there.
When there's no thought of commodity prices, no concern over the forecast, no worries about planting or harvesting, just...
Sometimes you're just kind of at the end of a rope, and you know, you tie a knot and you try to hang on, and it's still not enough.
But once the reality of making a living sets in, so can the loneliness.
How do you start that conversation with somebody who's kind of maybe going through the exact same thing?
At 19, Jeff traded the only life he knew since he could barely size up a cornstalk to enlist in the Navy. He ended up in the Gulf.
Get over there, you see a few things, you hear a few things.
He came back to fields that felt as foreign as the front lines.
You suddenly become old enough to drink, and it's very accessible.
Soon, Jeff was drinking before, during, after work. His marriage wasn't working out either. The problems stacked up like hay bales.
I have a night that I drink very excessively, had something that triggered me, and that was the night that I was gonna end it all.
So Jeff wrote a letter.
It's like drowning and knowing that there's absolutely nobody around. Worst feeling you've ever had in your entire life, and then multiply it by 10 times. That's a pretty realistic way to describe it.
He drove to an abandoned house, lit a match, and walked in.
People say that you know, that you get to that point and you have to be strong enough to commit suicide, and I disagree. I think you have to be strong enough to keep moving on.
Jeff was.
Check your fluids, check the tires.
After being sent to a psychiatric unit for treatment.
Well, there's your scream for help, but thankfully, you know, the scream was still there when it was all said and done.
The peaceful silence wasn't going to cut it anymore. No, Jeff had to cut through it.
I don't ever want to go back to that place, and I don't ever want anybody feeling that way.
He started talking with other farmers about his bipolar disorder diagnosis, his PTSD, what he lived through, or even just what he was struggling with that day.
Hey, you've got the same problems I do. Apparently, you know, the grass isn't necessarily green, you're on the other side. It's time to go back and fertilize our own ground.
More importantly,
why can't we ask the question about how somebody's doing?
Jeff started asking questions.
If you don't, I can just about guarantee at some point in time, the conversation you'll be having was with their family. And that's not a conversation any of us want to have.
And when it came time for him to tell his story, not surrounded by silos and soil,
And it hits me.
he flashed back to his Navy days.
We had to call a tugboat.
Not tractors, tugboats, small vessels that he trusted to lead him through rough waters.
You don't see them, but you know they're there because you're still moving. I think in life, everybody needs a tugboat. You need that person that you can call, that you say, hey, I'm in some treacherous waters. I need you to guide me, so on and so forth.
That's now the basis for a group he's starting, specifically for men, called Tugs, for talking, understanding, growing, and support.
I've had numerous opportunities for, lots of things in life, and, I'm glad I'm still here to do that.
Sure, farms can be secluded, and being a farmer can be lonely. But ask Jeff.
I tell people all the time, it's not a bad life, it's just a bad day.
It doesn't mean it has to be that way.
Are you willing to stop and have that conversation?
In Argyle.
And that's what we need to do.
Danica Lewis, WISC News 3.
I think the chaos is what makes me succeed.
A lot of us need to set limits for ourselves, boundaries, so we don't reach that level of chaos so often achieved
Right here
by an overachieving high school senior.
This is where I do all my schoolwork.
And then there's Anna Hoffman's workload.
So I tend to overthink things, and I tend to go too deep into it.
She'll be the first to admit the AP history homework, the essays to get into Utah or the UW, didn't always come easy.
I kind of have a fear of failure. It's kind of a major thing, and so it holds me back sometimes, where I won't even start doing something because I'm kind of afraid for failure.
So, naturally, Anna specializes in a sport with no risk.
Like, not a lot of people do it, so, I mean, it's kind of strange in that way. It's like a sport for, like, old Norwegian men. I'm kind of, like, not that. Just you, and you're in the air, so, I don't know. Not many other things that are that free, I guess.
Even in such a limitless sport, Anna knew something was holding her back.
I started getting treated for anxiety at the end of 8th grade, so about 4 years ago.
Hard work put in at places like Blackhawk Ski Club, followed by hard work and therapy.
It takes practice, and it takes a lot of time, and it takes a lot of thought every day.
And even with that,
I have a lot of bad jumps. That adrenaline rush just gets to you, and you just are so excited to go back up and do it again.
But one crash almost ended her ski jumping career for good.
Some of the hardest times of my life.
In 2014, Anna was in a car full of cross-country teammates. They were turning into Schuster Farms in Deerfield.
My friend and I were double buckled in the front seat.
Another driver speeding on Highway 12 hit them on that side. Anna watched her friends leaving in ambulances. One was hurt so badly she had to be flown to the hospital.
To be honest, I questioned why I got to live from that. And as a 14-year-old, that's really hard to do.
Yeah, that's a phone call you
Sharon Hoffman,
never want to get as a parent,
who rarely questioned her daughter's safety on the slopes, knew Anna needed help.
You'd take her in the car. After that, every time you tried to turn left, she would wince for months and months and months. When she saw her friends in the car, it was pretty bad, the things that she saw, for any kid.
Now dealing with something usually associated with older veterans, the PTSD, the anxiety, they weren't limitations. Not for Anna.
This is a treatable thing. This isn't something that has to restrict you from anything.
So the work continues.
I don't have to let this control me, and I don't have to let this fear of failure, fear of embarrassment control me.
Just as she pushes her limits physically, Anna continues to see a therapist and takes medication.
Anxiety is a disorder, just as if high blood pressure is a disorder.
It should not be regarded any differently than high blood pressure.
And you wouldn't go a day treated without high blood pressure medication?
You can live a very full, good life.
Why would you go a day without treatment of that?
And it's no different than that.
This was my first World Cup bib.
The same year, Anna questioned her existence.
Junior Nationals in Alaska.
And her future in the sport she loves so much.
For my first Junior Nationals that I ever went to and that I also won.
She won Junior Nationals.
That is my Olympic trials bib.
And went on to compete at an international level.
Well, I think that's what's the beauty about anxiety is it doesn't mean you can't do, any certain thing. Like, you can do anything. I don't think there's any reason to let any sort of problem hold you back.
Knowing living with a mental illness doesn't mean a life with limits.
You're not alone.
Because even a fear of failure can't compete with the freedom of flying.
I think it's been a work in progress, and I think it'll always be a work in progress. And that's something to look forward to, I think. Yeah.
If you want to stick out on a campus drenched in red, you go with the clashing Christmas color and really take it up a notch.
We have had people say, this doesn't match with my backpack.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
You can't miss that.
You just kind of roll our eyes and keep going, but...
But it's hardly standing out when thousands of students
3,100 and some.
are making the same fashion statement, a trend started by Conlon Bass.
Lime green's a catchy color, like it gets people's attention.
A lime green bandana tied to a backpack is also tied to a message.
A show of support for someone who might be struggling, who might not be getting that support from somewhere else. Just seeing a bandana, that's one person that cares about me on a gigantic campus.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a good one.
You too.
Fact is, any student who is struggling is far from alone.
By the time a UW-Madison student will graduate, 1 in 10 will have at least considered suicide. And that's crazy to me that it's that high of a number. That's 10% of a 40,000 person campus. And like, it's nice that people are actually talking about this stuff now.
Yeah, it is.
Conlon knew the compassion on campus runs deep.
Have you heard of the bandana project before?
I actually have.
He just needed to give people a way to show it.
So yeah, you can just tie that on your backpack.
Like, really show it.
I had to. Yeah, I couldn't not care about this stuff with all the stuff that my family and I has gone through.
When Conlon was a freshman in high school, his uncle took his own life.
And there's a lot of guilt involved. It causes those who are left behind a lot more pain, I'd say.
Then, in his senior year, Conlon lost a friend to suicide as well.
They didn't see an end to the pain, and escaping that pain was more important to them than pretty much anything. And what I remember most on those days is the response from my family, just having them be there for me, having us be there for each other.
Together, they realized they weren't alone in their grief.
Until I was affected by it directly in like one of the first major events of my life, I'd say, I just didn't really know that it was as big of an issue as it is. Having the bandana on your backpack just means that you carry a few resource cards. Well, I'm not grateful for everything, but I definitely think that good things have come from it. Seeking help is normal, and it's becoming something that more students can do more freely.
Through the chapter of the National Alliance on Mental Illness on UW-Madison's campus, Conlon started the Bandana Project, a way to encourage the conversations many people don't want to have.
I think a lot of people are reluctant to talk about suicide just because they're afraid they might say the wrong thing or ask the wrong question, but it's always better to be talking about it, removing the stigma. Having the bandana just means that you carry those cards and you're willing to be a resource if you're ever approached for them. So
each bandana comes with resource cards listing places to go for help and ways to talk someone through some of their struggles.
So having the bandana just means that you carry them and you're willing to pass them out if you're approached.
If nothing else, Conlon wants the students, the staff, even the most popular guy on campus.
Thank you so much, Bucky.
Thanks, Bucky. To know there's always someone willing to talk.
I had people say that seeing the bandanas on campus was a really strong show of support in a time when they really needed it. Super simple, yeah. And I think like that's plenty.
Conlon's Army of Neon, 1,000 strong and growing.
Thank you for signing up. All right. If I think about it too much, I'll get emotional talking about it, but
so mental health becomes a movement no Badger can miss.
Just every time you see one on a backpack, it just brightens your day. Because again, that's somebody who cares and somebody who's on campus to help make a difference, and that's not nothing, it's better.
So Conlon has already helped launch successful efforts at the University of Minnesota and Iowa State University, among other college campuses. He says if anyone at a high school, middle school, college campus, or community group wants to start their own bandana project, his team can help get them started. As always, you can find expert advice on suicide, other mental health topics from SSM Health doctors on our Time for Kids page. There are also resources for anyone struggling or wanting to take time to talk with their family. Just head over to channel3000.com/time4kids.